So please join me in welcoming both Catherine Klein and President Paul Kagame of Rwanda to the stage now.
President Kagame, it is wonderful to have you here. Thank you for the honor of coming to Wharton and to Penn. And thank you to everyone in the audience. I have to say, we really didn't know what size audience we would have, and we thought we better prepare for a smaller audience. And we realized very rapidly we were wrong. And this audience is testament to how eager everyone is to learn from you, to learn more about the story of Rwanda, and to talk about the future of Rwanda. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
So let me get started. I'd like to start with April 2014, the speech that you gave on the occasion of the 20th commemoration of the genocide. You were in Amahoro Stadium, a very serious, emotional, momentous time, 20 years after the genocide. And you gave a little bit of a history lesson and a framing of Rwanda at the time. And you said, at the end of the genocide, quote, "Everything was a priority and our people were completely broken." And you went on to describe three fundamental choices that Rwandans made in rebuilding the country. And I'd like you to help us understand those choices. You said, 1, we chose to stay together. 2, we chose to be accountable to ourselves. 3, we chose to think big. So particularly for those in the audience who may not know so much about Rwanda, could you tell us what those choices mean, what they meant, and how you came to them?
Thank you. First of all, I'm grateful for the invitation to come and address this gathering in this great institution. I'm happy to be here. And thank you for the many visits you have paid our country and many people in the audience. Now, to the question, the 3 points I raised in my speech at that time stemmed from, indeed, what we understand to be our history and the complexity of that history. And I started with being together. It talks about unity. It was relating to the very fact of how the country historically has been divided, and indeed the divisive politics bringing the country to witness the tragedy we had in 1994. So it therefore was trying to bring to the attention of everybody the importance of being together as a nation. Even if there will be diversity in our society, people will be different, but at the end of the day, we have to work toward a common cause for the interest of the whole country. And so I was appealing to people to say, we are different, we may think differently, but at the end of the day, we have to bring our energies together for the common good of the country instead of breaking it apart as we have already experienced. So we've learned lessons from that. It isn't just a story we are told, it's also a life we have lived. Second is the importance of accountability, meaning for all we aspire to achieve in our lives as a nation, and therefore learning from our history as well, how can we not say, in our sense of freedom, people doing things differently and acting differently and having different views, at the end of the day, you won't achieve this unity or you won't achieve progress unless in the exercise of your freedoms, you are able to think about the interest of the other and not just thinking about yourself. Therefore, that's how it comes to a point where every one of us has to be responsible, and we have to account to each other as well as we hold ourselves accountable, so that even with the best intentions people may have doing certain things differently, you don't end up hurting somebody else. And this again originates from our own history, where division was the order of the day, and people have been told to hate each other to the point that people started seeing the other as different, and not only different, they should get rid of them. Right. So therefore, accountability was important and was lacking at the time. So that's why I was talking about accountability, so that we really bring a sense of responsibility in everyone, the leaders and the citizens. And of course, number three, thinking big, was to relate to saying, first of all, even with all the problems we have faced in the tragedy we had 21 years ago, seeing how we have come out of that and where we are today, we also give a sense that nothing is impossible. If people set their minds to doing something they want to do and that is good for them, they will be able to achieve it. And there's nothing impossible to achieve. So if Rwanda can be where it is now, with that history, with all kinds of challenges, a small economy in the middle of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, right there in the middle, and landlocked, and, you know, almost short of everything, including the fact that we were now building from a very low base in which we were put by the genocide in 1994, and lost 1 million people, other millions displaced, impoverished, and so on. So, you know, if you think about it like this, it is easy for somebody to despair and say, well, we can't get out of this. This is impossible to change. So, but if you start from the point that everything is possible, and think beyond these problems, and really want to achieve something big, you will be there. And that's the experience we have had in the last 21 years.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you about reconciliation. So in many countries in the world, clearly, ethnic, racial, and religious differences are a source of ongoing discrimination, tension, violence, persecution. And I think we often look at those differences and think, this can never change. This will be here. We will be we and them forever. And maybe even we will be we and them, and maybe you can bury it, but it will reemerge. This is the human condition. In Rwanda, we see, astonishingly for foreigners who visited, we see genociders and survivors and their families living and working side by side in peace. And a common refrain in Rwanda is, you know, when asked about identity, I am Rwandan. We are all Rwandan. So I'd like you to talk with us about the extent of reconciliation in Rwanda today. And if reconciliation is a process or a multi-layered phenomenon, where is Rwanda today? What is the stage of, or the depth of reconciliation in Rwanda as you understand it and perceive it? How deep is this phenomenon? Where are we in the country? And then what are the implications for how you govern?
Well, that's a very deep and complex question, but anyway, as the situation is, let me say it this way. In 2004, when we were commemorating, remembering genocide in April 7th, there were two young people who survived. One of them had been picked from the mass grave. They had, there was a mass grave of 5,000 people. Caterpillars had come and just put bodies there and covered them with soil. And our troops arrived just moments after it had happened and picked people from that mass grave who were still breathing. And one young person who was there, showing, scars of that situation and so on. So after giving testimony and the pain and everything they experienced, so I directly asked him, I said, how do you manage? How do you really, and especially this was at a time when people had been involved in the genocide at different levels and had been in prison for some time, were released.
This was 2004, you said?
2004, that was 10 years after.
Right.
And I said, how do you manage? Especially when they had been talking about seeing people whom they think are responsible for the deaths of their families and so on, released from prison, which the government had done at the time, and a very complicated process. And this young person told me, he says, I am sitting there at home and watching people pass, and some of those are those that have just been released from prison by government, and as a gesture and as a way of trying to resolve these differences and reconciliation and so on. A complicated mix of reconciliation and justice. And he says, I just managed to live on and survive because the young man looked at me and says, President, and you other leaders, we trust you, we have faith in you, and you tell us to do a number of things to try and understand this, and that you are doing all this in the best interest of all of us. So we have faith with you, and that's how we survive. This is what the young man told me. So that tells the whole story. We are confronted with a situation here. You have perpetrators, you have victims in hundreds of thousands. It's not just a few cases you have to deal with. You do one thing, the other side thinks you're not doing enough, you're not even being fair. You do another thing, the other side thinks you're not being fair, you're not doing enough. And so you are somewhere right in the middle, caught up in the middle, but you have to do something. We have to attempt, we have to try and do something. So this is what we've been trying to do. So we tell people, he said, it's in your hands. There isn't going to be a solution that is going to come from elsewhere that we shall deliver to you. It's only going to come from within. And it's not going to be easy, but it's the only thing we have to do, because if we don't do it, the situation we face ahead will be even more complicated. To the point that we have lost 1 million and have a lot of suffering still going on. That will be doubled or tripled, if you will, if we don't really do the best we can to do that. So, but telling them that is not enough. You therefore have to design a number of things and ways to make sure that, for example, to some extent, justice is seen to be done. The other is the daily lives that have to be lived by providing education, health, food security, a sense of security that the other sense of security that those who are there, someone will not just come and take their lives again, the way it happened. But we have to design, and we found a way to say, but you are part of this. Ensuring your security isn't going to be achieved by somebody else doing it for you, but you participating in ensuring that you give somebody else security as well as somebody else is expected to give you security. And then, as I said, dealing with these social, economic issues that at the end of the day, somebody needs food, somebody needs education for their children, they need health, they need, this must be there. Otherwise, everything else will be, people won't understand what we are trying to do. So really, this is the complex nature of the processes we have had to go through. It takes time. So, but I'm saying, back to the very question you raised, I think we have turned the corner. We have built a foundation, a very firm foundation, but we have to build on that. So we are now in the phase of building on the foundation. I think the foundation is there. People understand the reason to get along, to give and take, to understand that nothing will be rosy and people will not be satisfied, all of them won't, but there will be a balance by which we can move forward and then get to the big things that must be done.
Great, thank you. So building on that foundation, let me ask some questions about some of the ways you have and continue to build on that foundation. Certainly another striking achievement for us, a striking achievement of Rwanda's, and particularly striking for those of us who come from abroad to visit Rwanda, is the extent of gender equality in Rwanda, perhaps specifically in the parliament. So no country in the world has a larger percentage of women in its parliament than Rwanda does, substantially over 50%. How has Rwanda achieved the gender equality it has? Why has it been important to do so? And what lessons can the rest of the world, can we as business leaders, as leaders in governments around the world, learn from Rwanda's successes in this regard?
There are maybe a number of things to learn from here, which we have learned ourselves by trying things. In fact, what has helped us in many ways, we are not afraid of trying things that may work for us, even for, in many cases, being in situations where there is nothing else we can do other than trying. So we tried that. And it stems from the whole history again, from, at least as far as I'm concerned, the liberation days, trying to change the situation in our own country. Some of us, I grew up as a young, from the time I was between 3 and 4 years old, I was a refugee. I grew up in a refugee camp for close to 25 years in a neighboring country, Uganda. And I lost my father when I was 14. It's my mother who looked, and we had 6 children. I'm the last born of the 6 children. And it's our mother who looked after us all the way up the time we grew up. Now, what sense does it make that, and I'm sure this is not just me, I'm sure there are many cases like that, many other cases. This is just my example. what sense does it make in a society to discriminate against your mother, your daughter, your sister, your aunt? It doesn't make sense. At the same time, in Rwanda today, 52% of our population are women. Can you imagine getting 52% of the population out of the economy? And you think you are doing something sensible? I don't think so. So there are issues of rights here as well. It's really an issue of even human rights. So we understood it from the beginning that women as well as others have to be involved in at all levels and in all activities meant for the development of our country. So that's how we designed our policies, and right from the beginning that has been the approach.
Built into the Constitution as well.
And even put it in the Constitution. We have to make sure that we don't take it like, leave it to anybody to say, to be left with the choice to do it or not to do it. We thought it was important that we make it an obligation, and that's how we put it in the Constitution, to make sure that women are given their rightful place in our society. In fact, there are a number of things we did. I probably not to go into all these, but for example, even we had very old laws that discriminated actually against women to the extent that women could not, for example, inherit property. So we have changed that law. Now our women can inherit property as men do and others. So this was trying to really bring the kind of sense into the balancing that we had to do. So that's how, and we encouraged it, and now we educated our women. We have invested in making sure that the health issues are given a priority, as well as when we have educated women and when they are healthy and they are playing other roles anyway as usual, we have encouraged them to participate at all levels in decision-making processes, so that they don't sit back and somebody else makes a decision that affects all of us, and specifically affects women when they have not had a say. That's how it came that we encouraged it, put it in a constitution, then encouraged them to participate, and they ended up, now we have 64% representation of women in parliament. We have about 42% in the judiciary. We have women mayors, we have women ministers. The Constitution tells us that we can't have less than 30% representation of women in the cabinet, for example, of ministers, and so on and so forth. So we are seeing it happening, and the benefits are real. When women have participated in decision-making, when they are in business, when they are doing different things, well, first of all, that is to scale that it should be, and they have different approaches they bring in the processes that we were missing if we didn't have women participating. So I think it's beneficial, as we have seen all around, and maybe we may actually attribute constant progress in the social and economic transformation of our country to this broad and deep involvement of women in our affairs.
Thank you. Jeff Garrett referred to Rwanda's economic progress, and I have yet another big question for you, and I know that you can't give the answers the full depth you might like. But I'd like to refer to your economic development strategy, the Economic Development and Poverty Eradication Strategy 2. EDPRS2. And this document, this strategy, outlines ambitious goals for the next several years. The overarching goal is accelerating progress to middle income status and better quality of life for all Rwandans through sustained GDP growth of 11.5% and accelerated reduction of poverty to less than 30% of the population. I will say, for those who have not experienced Rwanda, the specificity, the ambition of the goals and the specificity of the goals and the use of metrics is very much something we see over and over again in Rwanda. And if I can highlight for a quick moment the formula that is presented at the beginning of this document for those of us who are professors and theorists. It's a beautifully simple and incredibly challenging formula, and that is presented, and it says, rapid economic growth plus reduction of poverty to under 30% equals better quality of life for all Rwandans. So I would like for you to at least begin to discuss with us here how you envision Rwanda achieving these goals, continuing in rapid economic growth and reduction of poverty, and specifically reduction of poverty, as you know, members of the audience may not know, of course, I believe the numbers are something like 70% of the population are still employed in subsistence and live from their subsistence farming. So small plots of land, a real challenge as you think about growing the economy of moving these people off of their plots of land. Mm-hmm. So thinking big as Rwanda does, yes. How will you achieve this goal over the coming decade?
We start by transforming what we have as we do other things and maybe achieve what we didn't have. For example, we start with agriculture, which employs the majority of Rwandans. It has largely been subsistence agriculture. So we are now modernizing that agriculture, making it more productive so that the very large population involved in that gain more from it than has been the case before. And that is already happening. We've seen that. In fact, in the comment area mentioned, when we lifted 1 million people out of poverty, it was just between the year 2006 to 2011. And in fact, these gains came from the improvements we have seen in agriculture. Better seed varieties, available inputs, better methods, technology, and therefore more productivity, as we have seen, and finding markets for what is being produced, both domestically and across borders. So this is one part. So it is what we have. Can we realize the full potential? We looked at coffee, which is produced by Rwanda, one of the best coffees you have in the world, if not the best, as we know it across the world. Make it more productive, beneficial to citizens who had earlier on given up actually on growing coffee because there wasn't much coming from it. Now they're involved in growing coffee and they add value, they wash the coffee they produced before we export it. We are now beginning to roast our coffee and so on. So farmers are benefiting from that. Tea, the same thing, and so on. Anything that has been involving the biggest part of our population, we focused on it. Then beyond that, we started focusing on other areas where, again, we started from a very low base, but we know we have, so we built and leveraged the institutions we have created, the good governance thereof, and so started investing, say, in financial services, ICT, high-end tourism, and so on and so forth. These are things that have moved very fast and grown very fast and bring in a lot of benefits to the people and as well as to the country. So this is how we are managing it. And we are finding that actually things are moving faster than we even had expected. But creating an environment that is conducive to doing business, we had to attend to that. Safety and security for people and for investments they make in the country. All of these things have added up and helped us accelerate achieving the economic growth, but not just impressive economic growth, but economic growth that is contributing to development and that is inclusive, because we have made sure that Rwandans are involved in all these activities.
Thank you. Let me ask, I think, one more question before we'll take a few questions from the audience. So, as you know well, many foreign journalists and observers are critical of limits on free speech in Rwanda. And laws in Rwanda prohibit divisionism. Divisionism is spreading ideas likely to incite conflict based on ethnic, regional, racial, religious, language, or other divisive characteristics. And there are also laws in Rwanda that prohibit defamation of the head of state or other public officials. And so I'd like you to to help us understand how you think about the benefits and drawbacks of free speech and dissent for Rwanda. What are the benefits and drawbacks of free speech and dissent in the country as a whole, for example, in the press and social media, and if we have time, I'm mindful of the time, also in your own cabinet?
I think there are a lot of contradictions in what has been said in this area about Rwanda, and the disregard of the real facts on the ground. Now, let me say this. I use Twitter.
We know.
We follow you. For example, somebody said something about me.
Yes.
And I answered back by clarifying what it was. So we went back and forth. And actually, this person happened to be a journalist in the UK. Of course, as we continued arguing, this very journalist who wants freedom of speech to be exercised started complaining about how I am pushing back. So, and I asked this journalist, I said, look, you have a control, you want people to express themselves. And that's how you manage to say things about me the way you did. But at the same time, in this freedom of free speech, you don't want me to tell you my views of what I think myself. So is free speech going to be for you and not for me? Because this has been almost a constant throughout. So what is it that prevents me, a user of social media, giving my views? Even as a president, I have views. I'm not dumb, I'm just... So, but as long as you can push back and say what you want to say, I should be able to say what I want to say. Yes. Absolutely. Now, same thing. It happens even within our country. I'm actually exchanging, debating, discussing with the people on the social media. So, how this comes that we don't allow freedom of speech in Rwanda doesn't show in this that happens every day. Absolutely. So, now there's another thing. There have been a lot of surveys, international surveys, done by independent institutions, Gallup poll and all kinds of things. If you look in the reports that have come up in the last 3-5 years, you see, it's something interesting. They came and carried out surveys across thousands of people in Rwanda on their own. We didn't even know about it. In the report, they talk, the people saying that they are free to elect their leaders, to say whatever they want to say, it was 86%. Right? Now, but what is interesting and revealing of the point I'm talking about is, in that report, if you read it carefully, there is where they say, somebody, you can see the writer intends to bias the reader. He says, although Rwanda knows authoritarian, this starts by telling people it's, the leadership is authoritarian.
Right.
And then goes ahead to say, people who said they are free to express themselves to the council are 86%. But you can see, he starts by saying, it's authoritarian.
Sure, right.
So he wants people, first of all, to read that the following findings they made themselves should be disregarded. What should be taken is what he has stated, that this is an authoritarian situation. So I think Rwanda has two sides to it. There is what Rwanda is and has been and wants to be.
Yes.
There is another Rwanda in the eyes of other people who want it to be or expect it to be something else, and they make that a fact. That's the situation we have to deal with.
So your argument is that, in fact, there is substantial free speech and dissent.
Yes, there is.
And much of it playing out in social media.
I'm sure you have been there. By the way, even on radios, we have so many FM radios free, and you need to listen to what they are saying in French, in English, in Kenya, Rwanda, talking about the president the way they want. We haven't shut these radios. They are still operating. Nobody has been punished for it. So it doesn't really add up to some of these things being said.
Wonders of free speech, I'm motivated to come back to the microphone. Not to speak myself, but to say that we are in a university where freedom of speech and academic freedom and independence to pursue inquiry is at the core of all who we are. It's now the time when we're going to transition to questions from the microphones. We have 3. I'm very happy to traffic cop this. Could people who want to ask questions please find their way to the mic?
How have Rwanda's initiatives for female education translated into gender equality and other aspects of society and actual economic opportunities for women?
Thank you.
So my question is, so I participated to the program, it was an outstanding experience. So my question is obviously about your succession. So there's a lot of discussion in Rwanda about the 2017 election and your plan for the future.
So I understand that there was a huge turnaround with regard to Rwanda's healthcare system. I was wondering what were the major strides that led to such a quick turnaround?
So 3 quick questions, small topics. Political succession, empowering women in healthcare, I'm sure
Yes.
you'll take them in your stride.
Yeah, I try to be brief and so that you can take more. Education and gender. First of all, we have we have had women now gender parity in education. In fact, for us, we have achieved it as by the MDGs and other standards. We have gone beyond that. Women are educated, and once they are educated, first of all, it is good for themselves, for their health. It's good for their families, and so on and so forth. In fact, through girl and women education, this is how we have managed to control, manage better the population growth rate. it was mainly through that educating the woman. And this has had spin-offs in many other ways. So women education has helped in health, has helped in business, has helped in the economic growth we are talking about, as we have seen it. Now succession. I know there are many issues, so sometimes confusing or cross-cutting issues to do with succession. But succession in Rwanda or in a broader context, succession in Rwanda, the way we approached it, at least as far as I am concerned, we made sure that we created, have a constitution, we provided the environment in which governance should be exercised, and different political parties participating, and the way leaders move on. But again, in fact, currently we are having a very interesting debate. But from my perspective, the constitution, the succession process has a lot to do with the population, the citizens themselves deciding what they want to do, even in the case of this succession. What we did as a government has been to educate people, give them capacities, give them the freedoms to exercise anything they want. So come the time when succession should take place, the thinking and the aim behind this has been there should be people and to actually take over and do that peacefully as people may wish. So what is bringing the argument now at this point is that I'm supposed to run up to 2017, and the Constitution suggests that somebody else should come. As far as I am concerned, I respect that. I wish for that to happen. But there have been all kinds of debates now coming up and engulfing almost the whole country. It's about, maybe we rushed into this and made a good decision, but we are not where we wanted to be. It's like Rwanda's specific situation and complexity suggests that we cannot, and given the talk about progress and all kinds of things, you see, it's an issue of timing. We think we are not ready for this time to have the change that initially was planned for. And so, of course, you can imagine the situation I find myself in, because it involves me as a person. And it's like people ask me, said, what do you think? And what I think, for me, I have expressed it for quite some time and many times. What I think is that let's go along with what we have agreed that we should do when it comes to 2017. But then there are all these others say, no, but we don't agree with you. So there is a disagreement between me and others who, so we are in the process of trying to resolve that. But at the center of the discussion is Rwanda's specificity and looking at what has happened or what has not happened and where we are coming from and where we want to be. There are arguments pro and against having to change what we set out to do come 2017. This is where we are, and I think the succession issue then falls within that. And for me, I think it's a matter of time indeed, whether it is today or tomorrow or another day, succession has to happen. So here, I don't know whether people are discussing the date or the conditions or the context in which it must happen. So this is what is going to be resolved in the course of time. Then the healthcare situation, I don't know, it almost got answered in the first question, but we treated the health of our people as very important. Our biggest chunk of the national budget goes into health of women, of everybody, and we have created the health insurance that covers 87% now of our population, to which everybody, even the poorest, contribute, but people contribute more than others, depending on which category they are in of their incomes, which we have already determined through the statistics and knowledge of what these categories are. And we are seeing gains, and because of involving everybody, because of these policies like introduction of healthcare, health insurance, and everybody contributing to it, and the education of health practitioners, and for example, we have mobilized close to 50,000 health workers across the country in all districts. And these people have their own things they do in their daily life. They are volunteers, but they help on health matters in their areas, wherever they are. And we have seen child mortality under 5, the most significant reduction ever recorded in health systems of any country. We have seen maternal mortality go down as well. But it is because of these interventions that are grassroots based, and then resources being taken there to actually help them, as well as continuing to build the capacities across the board.
Thank you. I think we have time for 3 more.
At least one more round.
At least
What
one
a
more
good
round.
first round.
Jeff, you want to
Should we start on the other side, Catherine, this
Sure,
time?
go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. Wanted to ask, what are some specific strategies that the Rwandan government uses to hear the voice of the everyday citizenry and then incorporate that into the decisions you make, especially regarding economic development?
The methods? You said, what was the question? The start of the question was?
How does the Rwandan government incorporate the voice of the everyday citizenry?
Okay. First of all, we have a very advanced decentralized system of administration. In fact, our centralization is very effective. It goes up to the smallest units of our structures of governance. And there are constant discussions from these communities, what their needs are, how they see things, and how things should happen. And there is this interaction and compression of, between the local entities and the central government. So, in fact, again, there are resources come from 2 parts, the central government, others are generated from the local governments. And therefore, prioritization of what needs to be done is drawn right from the grassroots, as well as with the inputs from the central government. And then once things have been prioritized according to the needs of these people, that's how, first of all, policies have been drawn, but also implementation of the different programs based on that is done according to that.
And if you email me, I'll send you some readings to back this, to describe this in more depth.
Yeah, very good.
Yes, please.
Mr. President, my question is about your time in Uganda and Tanzania. I was just wondering, as a young military leader, how you were able to establish your legitimacy amongst a rebel group to go in and invade Rwanda and sort of end the genocide. And then moving from there, as president, how do you envision Rwanda fighting terrorism on the African continent in the next decade?
Okay. Well, my life story is very long, so I'm just trying to cut it short.
We wish we had more time.
Grew up in Uganda as a refugee, but later on got integrated in the Ugandan system. I became an officer in the Ugandan army after fighting wars in Uganda during the liberation of Uganda, from Idi Amin to some other people, and then after liberation, which happened in ended with 85. It had happened in 1986. That is in Uganda. In fact, after that, when I was serving in the Ugandan army, just before the liberation of my country and the activities thereof, I was here in the United States attending a military course at the Command and General Staff College, Fort Leavenworth, so which I had to cut short and go to participate. And that's how later on I came to lead the liberation movement after the commander was killed on the start of the war, and so on and so forth. So I was in Uganda, trained in Tanzania as well, and I trained in Uganda, in Tanzania, in the US, and so that's how I was enabled to participate effectively for the liberation of my country, and later on that's how I became the leader of our movement. So of course after that I became vice president, I headed the Minister of Defense, then later on became president. So I'm informed and shaped by the totality of these things I've gone through, the things that have happened to Rwanda, to me personally, to other Rwandans from outside. So it's been a complex kind of situation, but all that was to restore the rights of Rwandans, many Rwandans who had been refugees for decades, and then internally, Rwanda, a terrible situation, discriminating against its own citizens, keeping some outside of Rwanda, discriminating others inside of the country, and so on. So we have tried to change that, and but changing that has to come along with the focus on development. We want to be free, we want to be independent, but we also want to develop. You can't have one and not the other. They always must have come at the same time. So I've been, anyway, sometimes in different places or positions accidentally. Some of the things I have not planned for, but when I'm there, I will try to do my best and hope for the best as well. And as long as my country continues developing, and with or without me, is what I wish.
We're over to this side, I think.
Your Excellency, my question is in regards to leadership and governance across the African continent as a whole, and appreciating that you probably have your hands full governing Rwanda. To what extent are you involved in promoting better governance across the continent, whether through the AU or other avenues?
Well, we try to contribute or participate, but as you understand, each country or each nation will have its own rights to do things the way they want to do them. Sometimes even when nations are messing up themselves, you have very little to say other than from a distance trying to say what you want, but knowing that it may not change much. Ultimately, the people in any country will have to decide and act for themselves to get what. But we try to, one, encourage that first there be integration. We have been behind the process of integration. For example, in the East African region where we have Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, working together, integrating economically, even looking at the possibility of political federation. The whole idea is to say, well, first of all, Africa doesn't need really to keep being 54 countries. If we can, integrate at least in the sub-region and later on the whole continent, I think it is good for us. Fragmenting our economies and therefore missing also out on if a small country is having, anyway, individually every country is very small. Integration makes every country big. Even with problems, whether they are of political nature or conflicts, or when people get together and act together, we stand a better chance of resolving such a problems. So we participate in insisting that we should integrate more. It's healthy for security, it's good for trade and business and investments, it's good. It gives you a voice that becomes relevant in dealing with the many issues that we have to deal with. So we are very active in that.
Mr. President, could we take one more question?
Sure.
Last question from the middle. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, do you share the view that the United States was mainly responsible for the slow international response to the genocide? And if so, how has that impacted the way that you've dealt with the United States since you assumed office?
Well, first of all, my concentration is on trying to deal with the problems we face, not to pass blame to anybody. Knowing that also in this genocide, there are internal factors as well as external factors. So that caused the genocide. It's not purely Rwandan, it was also external. Then in the mismanagement of that, stopping it, or even if some people could have prevented it really, but we in Rwanda don't spend much time thinking about who caused it, why, where were they, and so on. We have had time for that. We've gone beyond that. We are now saying, what can we do for ourselves and what can we do with others who want to help to make sure that we really build a future for ourselves. So I think the United States, particular to your question, shares blame with many others. It can't just be United States. Because, for example, you have the failure of United Nations. The United Nations is not United States. At the UN Security Council, you have 5 permanent members who make decisions. They sat and made decisions to withdraw peacekeepers from Rwanda and leave Rwandans to themselves. At the time, actually, the peacekeepers were needed. Instead of adding more, they removed even the few that were there. It was a mess, but to single out an individual country or person and say if they had done this, nothing would have happened, I think may not necessarily be fair or correct or balanced. So there was failure, absolutely. The UN failed, many states, countries that could have done something didn't do what they could have done to prevent 1 million people being killed. And by the way, let me quickly tell you a personal story again. I have a family, very close family to me in Rwanda at the time. There are many families that were caught up in this, but I'm talking about, I just want to give you an example. And this person close to me was an employee of the United Nations and had worked for UNDP, United Nations Development Program, for 17 years. And she had a family of about 9 people. So when, during the genocide, planes came in to take to safety expatriates, including those who were working with my relative. But my relative had been there longer. She had been there for 17 years. So they picked all the others and took them away to safety, to Nairobi, others to Europe and wherever. They left her behind. It was, you are Rwandan, you stay and face it. And the next day, all of them were killed. So you can imagine that failure where even somebody working for an institution, and they just come and say, no, you stay and face the music. We want to take to safety foreigners, people who are not Rwandan. So that's how this family works. So there are many of these examples, but at the end of the day, do we really get caught up and get lost in this and lament over it and feel angry about it? And we've got to go beyond and think about the future. And that's what we try to do. So you can be sure we don't have to blame the United States. Well, we may blame them for other things in the future, but...
So,
thank you.
So, Mr. President, maybe as a quick closing note, as we look to the future and this audience of many young leaders who've had extraordinary experiences of leadership, a moment of leadership advice. What has served you well that you would say, as future leaders, I encourage you to do what?
Well, first is to want to find your place in the world we live in, starting with around you. I don't go so far away. I start from things around me and my country, and then how that relates to others. So you identify that, and you have to have a frame of mind that shapes what you want to be, what you want to do, what you want to contribute, and that's number one. Number two is to be committed to doing it, and to try and do the best you can, and not only be the best you can be in any situation, but do the best that may even impact others. And one thing that has served me well is I haven't been afraid of expressing myself and acting the way that I think is the right way I can be able to think about or identify. So, and try and be as fair as possible, and know that what is good for you may be good for others as well, so that connects you easily with other people. But in this place where I am as the leader of my country, and it becomes an issue for me that I always don't want to fail them, which failing them means failing myself. So I don't want. I will do the best, and without, I don't make much fuss about it.
Thank you so much for being with us. It's a fabulous discussion. We only wish it could continue, so we need to bring you back. We hope you, not only do we hope that many of the students will and others will travel to Rwanda, but that you will come back.